This is MSJ Chem. In this video, I'll be looking at calculating the retention factor value. The retention factor value can be used to identify the components of a mixture. It is defined as the ratio of the distance traveled by the solute to the distance traveled by the solvent. So here we have the equation for calculating the retention factor. So it's the distance traveled by the solute divided by the distance traveled by the solvent front. So next we look at an example. On the left we have a chromatogram produced in a chromatography experiment. At the origin we have a sample of the mixture to be separated. The mixture then separates into its components. So here we have two components, A and B. The distance traveled by the solvent is known as the solvent front. The distance traveled by the two components is measured as halfway between the bottom and the top point. So here we have the distance traveled by the solvent front, the distance traveled by component A, and the distance traveled by component B. So next we'll use this data to calculate the retention factor values. So starting with component A, we have the distance traveled by the component, which is 4 centimeters, divided by the distance traveled by the solvent front, which is 10 centimeters. Which gives us a retention factor value of 0.4. For component B, we have 8 centimeters divided by 10 centimeters, which gives us a retention factor of 0.8. The components can be identified by comparing their retention factor values to those of known compounds. So in this table, we have compound X and compound Y and their retention factor values. Here we have the retention factor values that we calculated earlier for components A and B. So by comparing the retention factor values, we can see that component A is compound X and component B is compound Y.